right, guys, welcome to our Business Aviation Career Webinar. My name is Derek Moore, and I am a proud NGPA member. I currently am the co-chair of the marketing committee. We're excited that you all could join us today, and we hope that the information that you learned today will help you in your own careers and inspire you to do something new. Now I want to introduce our great moderator for today's webinar. His name is Stephen Harris. Stefan's a former air traffic controller, and he's also a proud NGPA member himself. His professional experience has brought him through leadership through a bunch of local, national, and global crises such as 9/11, the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster, and Hurricane Katrina. And then today, he continues his success through aiding in the COVID-19 crisis. He's also a big advocate for the social justice for the Black community. And so now I want to turn it over to Stephen so he can get this thing kicked off. Hello, Stephen.
Thanks, Derek. Thanks so much. Welcome, everyone. I hope you all are enjoying whatever environment you're in. I think we have a power-packed session for you today. I am super excited to be amongst esteemed NGPA members, good friends, and professional advocates. And, so looking forward to the agenda that we've jointly put together for you today. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to actually start by introducing each of you to our panelists who are going to provide a multifaceted overview of their professional journeys. And also, we're going to spend some time with a Q&A session to sort of maybe double click on each of their journeys to give you an opportunity to maybe, envision where you are in your career and how the experiences of our panelists either relate, inform, or encourage you to continue or potentially even look at other options throughout the entire portfolio of career paths across the aviation spectrum. So as part of our esteemed panel committee, we have Kirsten Krueger. Kirsten joined Gulfstream in the summer of 2017. She's had a very interesting journey, and I'm excited that she's on this panel. She's a regional sales manager, and she's a 20-year veteran within this community of business aviation. I think most of us, when we think of aviation, we think of two things. We think of aircraft, right? So we think of either flight attendants, or we think of all of the airlines that we all fly on. And this community is a different community. So she's been in the business aviation community for well over 20 years. She began her aviation career on the ramp and fueling operations in San Jose Airport, not too far from where I'm located here in the Bay Area. And throughout her tenure, she's worked in charter sales, aircraft management, and fractional aircraft sales. Kirsten has a BS from San Jose State University, an MBA from Santa Clara, and she is a multi-engine commercial rated instrument pilot and holds an unmanned aircraft systems license. So a lot of wealth of knowledge and experience wrapped up in Kirsten. Our second panelist who you'll get to hear from today, and you just heard from, is Derek Moore. Derek has worked for Textron Aviation for 6 years. He started in the aftermarket segment of the business and has transitioned. I was getting ready to say transformed. He's probably also transformed, but he's transitioned to a variety of roles within the community. He currently works in aircraft sales, covering the Cessna Pistons and Cessna Caravan in Houston, Louisiana, and Arkansas. Derek also holds a BA in marketing from the College of the Ozarks. Very interesting background as well, and I'm excited for you guys to also hear from Derek. And our third panelist, Hunter Watson. Oops, sorry there, I scrolled too quickly on my device. Hunter Watson started his career in August of 2018 with the National Business Aviation Association, NBAA, membership department, providing excellent customer service to members needing assistance. He He has recently been promoted to NBAA's operations department, head of NBA's operations department as an operations specialist, and manages the NBAA compensation survey. Additionally, Hunter helps with NBAA Yo Pro Group. I think you'll hear more about that. Very interesting, very exciting, and also recently just covered in the most recent newsletter, which advocates for young professionals in business aviation. He holds a BS in Aviation Business Administration from Embry-Riddle University. You're also going to hear from Ryan McCown. And Ryan is a personal friend of mine, but also a professional friend of mine that I've known for many years. And his career as a corporate pilot with over 10,000 hours and 20 years of industry experience. He's currently a captain and aviation manager on a Falcon jet for the Solaris Aviation Organization in San Jose, California. In addition to his handful of jet type ratings, Ryan is a seaplane pilot, a flight instructor, and a certified aviation manager, also known as CAM, with the NBAA. And lastly, you're going to hear, last but not least, you're also going to hear from Caleb Astutely, who has over 17 years of business development and marketing experience in the aviation industry. His experience includes federal contract management, media relations, and proposal development. As a marketing and client relations manager, he is responsible for expanding Chantilly Air's customer base by providing excellent customer relations, operational expertise, and dynamic marketing campaigns. Caleb earned his degree in international business while focusing on marketing and studying Spanish in Central America. Wow, very interesting, right? He is active within the aviation industry, currently serving on the board of directors for the Greater Washington Business Aviation Association, and named as top 40 under 40 by the NBAA. So I think we've got a great portfolio of panelists. I'm hoping and expecting that each of you in attendance will find an opportunity to connect, relate, and or be inspired by each of our panelists. So before we actually formally kick off and I hand it to Kirsten, I do want to remind all of you participating that we are living in a COVID compliant world. And as a result, we must also hold our social responsibility in letting the world know what's going on. So please do take full advantage of hashtagging and snapshotting and posting on Twitter and LinkedIn and all of the social platforms using our NGPAE everywhere hashtag and make some comments. Let's draw interest in the same way that we've drawn interest for all of the attendees today. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Kirsten, who's going to take us on a journey. You are cleared for takeoff.
Stefan, thanks so much for moderating this panel. I really want to also thank the NGPA for hosting. It's a pleasure to be invited here today. Gulfstream is a proud sponsor of NGPA. And of course, I'm happy to be here with my industry colleagues on this panel, and of course, to all of our future aviation leaders, right? All the participants here on this call today. So my journey, it wasn't planned, it wasn't expected. It would have been a lot easier had it been. I'm really, in summary, just a product of grit, hard work and humility for sure. Back when I was a senior in high school, I recall a conversation with a math teacher. I think it was calculus or something. And I remember him asking me what I wanted to be when I grew up, right? What was I going to go to college for? And I responded, a pilot. And he gently told me that pilots need to be really good in math. So clearly, side note, I was probably not acing that course. So, off to college I went, and I wandered around with absolutely no direction, no guidance. I was taking classes for the sake of taking classes. And as each one of us has experienced, there are bumps in life. And I was a sophomore in college, and my brother unexpectedly passed away. And that's when I realized that life is super short. And it taught me my first lesson that you and only you can tell yourself what you can or can't do. So I pursued flying and obtained, as Stefan, you mentioned, my commercial multi-instrument license. I have an instrument rating. Because I was also putting myself through school, taking out school loans and paying for flight training, I realized there's never a time and period in my academic career that I was not actually just working and studying at the same time, which taught me a really important lesson, number two, in that I still, obviously all these lessons are life lessons that I carry with me today, in my career, and that is grit really matters. So I'm going to school at this point, San Jose State University, and I realized that I needed to get directly involved in aviation. If this was going to be my career, I really needed to get hands-on. And I also happened to need a second part-time job at the time. So I recall seeing a logo on a classmate's shirt, and I asked her, what's that? She told me, oh, it's just a local company here on the airport in San Jose called ACM Aviation, which was then an FBO and a management company. So up to that point, I had never seen a business aircraft in my life, ever. I almost didn't even really know they existed, quite frankly. So the next day I rode my bike over and applied for a job. Now, I know I'm dating myself. This was back in the day when you actually went and knocked on the door and you sat there and you penned an application. So I worked in line service, customer service, and charter. And from there, I got noticed for hard work and for just doing a good job. And that taught me a really important lesson of number 3, starting at the bottom, it gives you a perspective that will pay dividends down the road. And it's interesting because the people that now today I used to service their airplanes are the same customers for the most part that I'm actually selling aircraft to. So it's really a very cool full circle. But this led me to my second break that, at the time I was working graveyard shift. I was covering charter on nights and weekends so that I could finish my academic school classes during the day. When an industry colleague, mind you, this was an industry colleague at a competing company, he called me and asked me if I wanted to come work for them because they're opening an office in San Jose. And that's lesson number 4. Your networks, they really matter. So from there, I received a promotion to sell fractional shares for NatJets. And then, long story, everything with luck, I had the opportunity to move into whole aircraft sales. And that taught me really lesson number 5 is that, you don't ever give up. You just don't ever give up. You keep grinding away and good things really will happen. So when I was, thinking about my journey, I learned really early on some very powerful skills that helped me. And I would like to share with all of our participants here today. For all of you young aspiring leaders, in aviation, there are 4 takeaways really. And the first is, and this is going to be crazy and everybody can laugh, but be the best at whatever you're doing. So I literally was the best at dumping labs. And I'm not kidding you. I literally ran around the ramp, towing airplanes, dumping labs, being the first to get the catering to the airplanes, helping the pilots as much as possible. And I really got noticed, right? So it taught me that no matter what position you're doing, master the position you have now. Be the best that you are at whatever it is, and you're going to get noticed. And if you're not willing to put in the extra hours, there's always somebody that is, and that's something that I can assure you. So then secondly, the door that opens, it may not be what you initially want or maybe even expect, and that's okay, because your journey, it's going to be different than the next person's, and no matter what you do, you will learn something that's going to help you throughout your entire career. So don't go for glamour, and I know that's hard to recognize and sometimes do. Really, truly go for experience, because that again is going to pay dividends. So thirdly, be nice. If it's one thing that's a constant, no matter what career you have, what company you work for, where you're at in the world in your career, is that the constant is that people want to work with really nice people. So be kind, show respect, and I promise you good things really will happen for you. And then lastly, because I really believe and I'm passionate about this, the world is really bigger than just you and I, all of us here today. So invest in yourself and invest in your community. And whether this is just in the pursuit of learning by additional degrees or certificates or licenses, don't stop expanding. I mean, I pursued getting my drone license for no other reason than I just thought it would be really cool to get another certificate on my pilot's license. I pursued an MBA because I wanted to learn more about, quote, business. I volunteered teaching swimming lessons because I'm really good at it. I put myself through college doing it, and it was easy for me to do. And the joy that it brings to make, someone else's day is huge. So I hope my story, I hope it gives confidence to anyone out there who's wandering about and wondering, perhaps what's next for them. This is just a reminder that don't be afraid to take any job in the industry. It's okay if it's not the job you ideally want in the beginning, because the more you learn and the sooner that you learn it, the more doors that will open. So that's really my journey, and I hope it helps.
Kirsten, that was phenomenal. I'm inspired now. Wow, great tips. I mean, the 5 tips you provided, the life lessons around be nice and don't ever give up, but maintain a spirit of grit, because regardless of where you enter, it's all about how you exit to the next level or to the next part of that journey. And I just think, wow, thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for your transparency. Kirsten is an ally of our community, and I am just super excited to have had this opportunity to engage, to learn more about her professional journey, and excited to see that continue to unfold and unpack itself. So thank you so much. Next up is Derek. Derek.
Hello again. Thank you, Stefan. So I grew up in a small town in Missouri, and growing up, I did not want to be a pilot. I wanted to be a veterinarian. And I knew that was something that I felt would fulfill me, until I went to a couple of vet appointments on the farm and realized that my stomach was not made for that. And so when I was 13 years old, there was a gentleman that came into my dad's work, and he had a couple airplanes, and he would always offer me a free plane ride. And mind you, I had never been on an airplane at this time. I hadn't been on an airliner. My feet had never left the ground. And so I continually turned it down. I was too scared. I was like, I will be sick. I cannot do it. And eventually my dad said, Derek, you better do it, because you might never get a chance to fly in a little airplane ever again. And so on like the 4th time that he offered, I finally said, okay, I'll take it. And so I went up, and that was when I was 13. And that was the day that I got the itch for aviation. I fell in love. We flew in a seaplane and landed on the lake, and in front of this shopping mall. I remember all these people coming out to the edge of the shopping mall, just looking at us. And I felt like a celebrity. And I said, you know what, this is what I need to do the rest of my life. And so eventually, once I got a job, I started working. And when I turned 16, I said, I'm not going to buy a car. I am going to put myself through flying lessons. And so I cleaned a lot of tables, and I took a lot of food to tables. And eventually I was able to take my check ride when I was 18, back in 2011, when I was a senior in high school. After that, I did it all part 91, or 61 at the local airport. My flight instructor was 88 years old. And so I got to learn a ton that I think that you don't get in a more structured program. So I really cherish that experience. Eventually, after high school, I went to College of the Ozarks, where I majored in business administration with an emphasis in marketing. Spent 4 years there. And during my senior year of college, I decided that I needed to find an internship that I could leverage my marketing degree, and I could also stimulate my passion for aviation that I had. How could I fulfill both? And so I applied for American Airlines internship. I applied for a Southwest internship, for a JetBlue internship, and all of them turned me down. But to Kristen's point, I did not give up. I was determined I was going to find something. And then it dawned on me that I should check OEMs. So I checked Cirrus, and I checked Piper, and I went around and I looked for anything. I ran into dead ends. And then one day I was sitting at the computer, and I found an internship at Cessna Aircraft Company. How Cessna didn't come to the top of my list. I mean, it's like the household name for airplanes. I don't know. I found an internship, I applied, and they called me that afternoon and set up a Skype interview. And so long story short, they offered me a position. I moved to Wichita for the summer and spent the my entire time there learning the ins and outs of that area of the business. And I spent time in aircraft sales. I spent time in the aftermarket segment. After 3 months of that, they offered me full time, and I was, ecstatic. How exciting! How exciting to go back and be a part of this company. I joined I joined full-time as an aftermarket sales associate. So I was basically lead generation for our sales team out in the field that fill our service centers with work. And so I was doing that, and then I said, you know what, I want to sell airplanes. That was my goal. I want to sell airplanes. And I was like, how do I do that? How do I get there? And so I got on with the aftermarket sales position, and then this door opened that there was a position opening up for a manager role, an aftermarket sales manager role in Phoenix. I called the guy and I said, I just want to let you know, I want my hat tossed in the ring when you consider filling that position. And he said, well, have you ever thought about Houston? And at the time I was like, Houston is not the place that I want to be. It's hot, it's muggy. I've heard terrible things about that city, and I don't want to go there. But I said, you know what? I should at least entertain it. And I told the boss that I was like, I've never been there. I would have to see if I could live there. He goes, well, go see if you can. And so I did. And I remember sitting on my couch one night being so scared I was going to move this far away from home. And I said, you know what? I could not do it, but if I don't do it, I will always wonder what if I would have. And so I did, and I moved down, and that was really where my career really took off. I spent 3 years in Houston filling a service center down here we're full of Citations, King Airs, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was not an AMP. I was, staying up late at night trying to be the best that I could be. I was, studying these maintenance manuals and figuring out what modifications can go on which airplane. I devoted a lot of time to that. And then in 2019, in April, this position opened up online about selling airplanes. And I called the boss and I said, where is this position located? And they said, it's in Dallas. And I was like, holy crap. So I called and I said, I want to be considered for that position. And here we are today. I was able to be accepted to that. I moved to Dallas and was able to fulfill that dream that I had 6 years ago when I started with the company, that I wanted to sell airplanes. It took me 3 positions to get there in 3 different roles and 2 different cities, but eventually I got there. So to echo Kirsten's point earlier, I am a big advocate of don't overlook the opportunities that your company presents to you, because that can be a chance to learn more about your products, learn more about your company, network with different individuals, and all in all, at the end of the day, it's just going to be a stepping stone to get you to your dream job. So that is all I have. Thank you, Stephen.
Awesome, Derek. It's pretty cool that you basically, found your career path by overcoming a fear, right? So all along the way, you've been having these micro opportunities to overcome challenges, and they have become benefit rocks for you, right? That you just, stair step your way. And it's quite exciting because I think it personally, when I hear you talk about it, I hear a non-traditional route of becoming a professional in a space for which you never had a dream or a passion to truly pursue. And now look at you, right? You're successful, and you're doing things that probably no one ever thought you would do, or you thought you would do. And you get an opportunity to now share that back with the broader world. And that's just so cool. So thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
All right, next slide. So now we get to hear from Caleb. Caleb, kicking it over to you. Take us on a journey.
Thanks, Devin, for introducing me there. And again, thanks for NGPA for allowing us in business aviation to kind of share a little bit of this side of things and what our world is here. Kind of like everybody else who has shared so far, business aviation was not even on my radar as I was going through my education. I was an international business major with marketing and Spanish minors, and hadn't even flown on an airplane actually until I was 18. So aviation was totally new to me. one of the things that, I know we have some younger folks that are on listening, is to really leverage the relationships and the networks that we do have available. And for me, that was my college professor, who I just utilized to ask a lot of questions. And that's actually who set me up with my internship with a small company at the time. It was a small company who had just purchased some King Airs and was looking for a marketing intern. So he said, well, how do you feel about working at an aviation company? I said, I don't know a thing about aviation. I just flew on my first airplane last year, but I'm willing to learn. So like Kirsten said earlier, just, not saying no to something that maybe is uncomfortable for you and just leaping in with both feet. That internship, was something that I started out working with customer databases and even washing windshields on King Airs whenever they came back, and eventually led to a full-time position whenever I graduated. And I was able to do, a lot of different jobs within business aviation that you might not think of. I did a lot of contract administration with the Department of Defense, and building relationships with the customers. So the marketing and the business development side that you might not think of when you think of aviation, but that's where I really got my experience. After I spent 11 years at Dynamic doing a lot of government contracting work, I was like, I want to get on the commercial side of this. I want to learn a little bit more about what else is out there. And I moved over here to Chantilly, where I'm working with charter customers and aircraft owners as we manage their assets, and really being able to manage and direct a brand in its entirety. So that means doing things from social media, direct mailings, different graphic designs, all different kinds of things that you might not think of. How can I get involved in business aviation? But the opportunities really are there. Two of the things, I know that Hunter is going to speak about it a little bit later, is the NBAA YoPro group, which offers great resources. And many of you will find that there's actually local business aviation groups or associations that are around where you're at. For me, it's the Greater Washington Business Aviation Association. These groups are always looking for volunteers to even set up for events, or even to volunteer the day of. But you know what? It gets you in front of the people who are making decisions. And so whenever a job does come available or an opportunity becomes available, they're going to ask you because they know who you are and they know that you're willing to go the extra mile, kind of like Kirsten said earlier. So yeah, that's my story, how I got into business aviation. Wasn't on my radar at all, but now that's all I know.
Awesome, Caleb. Thanks for sharing. I'll tell you what, it's quite interesting, right? When you think about the multidimensional facet of the career paths that are available to those that are interested in aviation. Derek talked a little bit about it. Kirsten talked a little bit about it as well. And then you highlighted it, right? Which is you really can come at this profession from any angle and multi paths, right? Because just like any other organization, the aviation industry serves every segment of our market, including the technology space, right? And so individuals should be encouraged, just in the short, stories that we've heard so far, that there is a multiplicity of ways in which you can lock in around your interest, around your appetite and desire, and still have a broad spectrum of opportunity before you. So thank you so much for sharing. All right, up next is Ryan, not McCown, but Vallone, and I'll let him explain all to you, Ryan.
Stefan was at my wedding, so he could use my former last name. Thanks, Stefan. And thanks to NGPA for hosting this event and inviting me to speak. I'm always happy to share my career in aviation and hopefully inspire others to join the industry. And hello to everyone at home and to those joining us later on the podcast. I'm Ryan McCown of Alone. I'm a career corporate pilot with 23 years of industry experience, over 10,000 hours of flight time, with the majority of that being in multi-pilot, professionally flown jet aircraft. It's been a wonderful journey for me, and I'm looking forward to the next 15 years or so. You know, I initially started in business aviation as a line tech. I was pumping gas into business jets at the local FBO. And then a few years later, I found myself flying them. I'm currently a captain and an aircraft manager on a Falcon 2000 based in San Jose, California for Solaris Aviation, which is one of the larger aircraft management companies here in the US and very similar to Chantilly Air. On a more personal note, I live in Venice, California with my husband, Jameson, our new little pandemic puppy, Disco. So next slide, or you already have it there, Stefan. I was introduced to flying when I was 16 years old in somewhat of a non-traditional way. No one in my family flew, nor had I spent much time around airports or airplanes as a kid. Aviation found me when two instructors arrived at my high school soliciting students. I took them up on their discovery flight offer and I was hooked. It wasn't easy though. My parents were frightened by the idea and refused to pay for it. But even without their support, I managed to make it happen and had my PPL by the time I graduated. Now for college, I originally wanted to enroll in the aviation departments at either UND or Riddle, but the reality of the situation was that my family couldn't afford the out-of-state tuition and the flight lessons. But if I stayed in California, my parents agreed to match me dollar for dollar for each flight lesson. So I took their deal and enrolled in San Jose State's aviation department, which was an excellent program and a decision I don't regret. I eventually graduated from San Jose State, and during that time, I put in a lot of work. I continued my flight training and eventually became an instructor. I was the president of our 3 aircraft flight club. I was awarded an internship with a major airline. And as I mentioned before, I worked a few different jobs at that local FBO, first in line service. And by the way, Kirsten and I did work together line service, and she was the best at dumping labs. And then eventually I became the flight department admin. And to be honest, as the admin, I basically updated databases for pilots who were too lazy to do it themselves. Well, but it was something, and it was a start, and I was happy to have it. Well, that start turned into an opportunity. That FBO offered me my first flying job. It was on a Citation Ultra supporting a large Silicon Valley software company. That opportunity turned into a 7-year employment relationship. We eventually grew into a 6 aircraft operation with a team of pilots, mechanics, and support staff. At the software company, I was flying an average of 500 hours a year. We typically worked 4 days on and 3 days off. We were hitting multiple cities each day. These jets were directly supporting the executive team's business efforts and were a huge productivity tool for them. So when I moved on from the software company, I took a pivot within business aviation. I added a management component to my flying role. For the past 13 years, I've been flying and managing a Falcon 2000 with a smaller staff of 2 pilots, a mechanic, and a part-time flight attendant. In addition to the flying, my responsibilities include managing the team, creating budgets and forecasts, and dealing directly with the owner with all his aviation matters. In fact, in the past few weeks, we've made stops in Atlanta, Wyoming, San Francisco, Hawaii. We've kept fairly busy even during this pandemic. Throughout my career, I've always made an effort with professional and personal development. In some cases, you don't know where one ends and the other begins. I became a volunteer and mentor for a foster youth program in San Francisco, California. I received a master's degree in aviation management from Embry-Riddle. I received the Certified Aviation Manager credential from the National Business Aviation Association and did some recreational flying by adding a few seaplane ratings and an unmanned aircraft systems license for flying drones, which, by the way, I'm terrible at that. But over the past years, I've also done my best to stay involved with the aviation community. I'm a member and mentor at NBAA, our big lobbyist group, a member here with NGPA for over 10 years, and I volunteer on a diversity and equality committee that focuses on business aviation. I'm happy to be here today and happy to see NGPA putting some additional focus on business aviation, and happy to answer any questions that fellow members might have, whether that's here today or if we connect at a different time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. What a journey. Just quite the portfolio there. And I love how you you came also at this profession, to become a pilot in a very different way, right? You didn't come from, a long line of, pilots where your dad or your uncle or members of your family were pilots, right? You sort of discovered it in a very different way. And I think that's extremely encouraging, from a outsider's perspective, but also from an insider's perspective, right? An individual could be, working as a mechanic today and, flying, Falcons or 737s tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Not quite that quick, but, futuristically speaking. So whatever that dream or that passion is, hold on to those words that Kirsten has shared around, just digging in and not giving up on your dream, right? And never quitting and maintaining that spirit for the opportunity that grit brings into your life, because it truly will give you, right, some of those outcomes that you might be looking for. All right. Thank you, Ryan, for sharing. Hunter, last but not least, I am turning it over to you. Take us away.
Thank you, Stefan. As everyone has introduced themselves, my name is Hunter Watson. I work here at NGPA. I'm currently remote in Washington, D.C. So how did I get my start into aviation? I think my start necessarily was whenever I was very young and my dad would get off work and he would pick me up from daycare and we would go to the end of the runway at George Bush Intercontinental Airport. And while he would sit on the back of the little tailgate of his truck, I got to run around and watch all the planes flying over and taking off. And that was necessarily where my start and drive started coming into a passion of what I wanted to do. And in growing up, I looked at other opportunities of, should I go into engineering? Should I go into architecture? And then I recognized the coursework that was also to follow with those. And that was not something that I wanted to do, of staying in school for a very long amount of time. And so then I started looking into other opportunities as what could I do? Look into the business side of things. Is there a thing called airport management? Could I do that? And I stumbled upon Embry-Riddle, and Embry-Riddle was my #1 university that I wanted to go to. It was the only one I cared about, even though mom and dad still were very loud and proud and true to, hey, you have to go to Texas school. It's either gig 'em or hook 'em, and that's what we will have. So Embry-Riddle was something different. It was a fun environment. I went to the Prescott campus. So compared to Daytona, this campus was only 2,500 students. And I recognized day one of being at Embry-Riddle, I needed to be my authentic self. If I wanted to create a future and a career path that I felt true to, I needed to be true to myself. So I had tons of support. I graduated in 2018 and thoroughly enjoyed that experience. I got to travel a bunch. Just with inner groups at Embry-Riddle. I think one of the best adventures was going on a 13-day study abroad cruise over in Europe and going to Moscow. That was a fun experience. But in my time at Embry-Riddle, I also got connected, and that was connected into student organizations that got me involved and recognized networking was the #1 thing you needed to do. Sometimes it's not what you know, it's who you know and how those people can help you get to a spot in your next destination. So I got involved. I got involved with our local campus student organizations to be a part of NDAA's base organization or conference that is co-located, where it's in Orlando one year and then in Las Vegas. So I got to go to 3 of those experiences. And then I also joined NGPA as a student. And NGPA allowed me to start digging into who I wanted to be and what career I wanted to get into. And being a member with NGPA for 8 years now, I got to meet a lot of different individuals, and some of the most memorable experiences were going out to check out all the private aircraft and take pictures. And that was where that thriving passion started to come into business aviation. I graduated in 2018. I applied to 120 different job applications. A majority of those were airline focused in those positions. And I recognized that, that wasn't something I wanted to do. Those companies were a little too large. I needed to scale back. I needed to figure out what was something I felt comfortable with in starting my career. And all it took was calling up a few friends at NGPA to see what are the best directions. And now it's landed me at a position with NDAA. So I'm very fortunate. I am super thankful to have the opportunity and to be my authentic self in this industry. I know it can be a challenge in just about every industry, but having that ability to be your authentic self is the #1 key. As Ryan also mentioned, you can connect with me as well. There's my personal Instagram on the left-hand side of the screen. And then also YoPro is a fun segment group in NBAA. And that is it's a group where younger professionals can come together and really build that sense of community. And there's a lot of outreach that we do. There's a lot of community involvement that we do. But we recognize that there's always a sense of belonging. And so YoPro is a great way to see that as a young professional, you belong, no matter what position you may have, or even if you're just a graphic designer, you still belong a part of that equation because it's a bigger team to make the mission successful overall. So feel free to add me on social media and we can connect later. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, wow. So many nuggets in your message that you shared with us. And I just want to double click on something that I think is extremely important. It's when you really talked about the equation of, the concept and the mantra behind diversity, right? It's really about diversity plus inclusion plus equity, right? And so, when you have equality in the space, when you are inclusive in your behavior and kind, as Kirsten said, you can see the true inner workings, benefits, and outcomes, but more importantly, the impact that you have on your business, on your respective teams, on your environment, both personally and professionally. And that's when you start to see the benefits, the true benefits of diversity. So thank you, Hunter, for rounding us out by sharing both your background and giving us that additional tip. Okay. Well, we have heard from our esteemed panelists. I do know that our team also wants to share some resources with you. So the next couple of slides, I'm going to hand it off to, I believe it's Ryan and Kirsten jointly are going to cover some resources that you all may want to take full advantage of. And before we close out, we're going to have a quick fire round of Q&A. And I'd also like to invite individuals in our audience today that if you have specific questions, go ahead and submit them in our Q&A. I believe it is open in our Q&A area. And I'm going to make this commit just because I know we're a bit tight on time. That is, we're going to try to get to as many of those questions as possible. But for the ones that we don't, we will have an action plan to do a follow-up and post those responses to the questions that you all so kindly take time to present or to present to us. So with that, I'll hand it off to Kirsten.
Okay, thank you, Stefan. Yeah, so we wanted to just put together all of our collective on this panel years of experience of what groups have, we worked with and what we think is going to be a good resource for you. So listed here are most every group that one, if not all of us panelists here have chatted about today. I think they're fairly self-explanatory, but I open it up to any of my colleagues here if there's anything in particular we want to point out.
Yeah, Kirsten, let me jump in there. I don't think we have time to read them all, but these will be available after the webinar. But mentoring networks, there's a mentoring network here at NGPA, and there's also a mentoring network at NBAA. As Caleb talked about joining local groups, getting involved, maybe even volunteering for something. And don't forget to look at some of the ally organizations like Women in Corporate Aviation and Women in Aviation International. And then there's lots of, actually, can you go back there one, Stefan? Oops, there you go. There's lots of scholarship opportunities as well. So don't forget to overlook the scholarship opportunities. And then let's go forward to the next slide. We've put together popular job sites. So LinkedIn definitely has some great stuff, BizJet jobs. And at BizJet jobs, you're going to find, especially if you're looking for pilot jobs or pilot opportunities, they have instructors sections, a low hours section, co-pilot section, and even aviation management. So they have the non-flying stuff as well. And then NBAA also has a job flash that they send out on I believe it's a weekly basis. And then the next one to professional development. There's lots of different ways to get involved. If you can't be in your chosen profession right now, what else can you be doing to make yourself more attractive as a candidate in the future? LinkedIn has some great courses that you can take and even end up with a credential at the end of it. NBAA has a CAM program. Don't forget about the FAA Wings program. And then Kirsten, you're involved with the volunteer match. Could you want to speak to that for a second?
Yeah, so I like Volunteer Match because it is a volunteer organization. Think of it almost as a search engine that crawls your local community and identifies volunteer opportunities based on your interest. And you could do multiple volunteer opportunities in multiple organizations. So if for some reason you say, gosh, I have a Saturday open, let me see what's available for me to volunteer in my local community, you can go on there and it will crawl through all of these opportunities of, from anything, picking up garbage to helping assisted, the elderly, maybe go get groceries. It's a pretty useful and resourceful website. And then just to back up to Ryan's point about LinkedIn, I definitely would encourage you, especially if you're not, in maybe the chosen career path that you want to be in right now, go out and get a certificate in something, go learn how to code, do something that you think you may not necessarily make your living in for the rest of your life. But I think that it's going to give you just another avenue of putting something else on a resume of, diversification.
Love that. Absolutely love that. Thank you guys for sharing the resources and the additional tips. Very, very helpful. As we move into our Q&A section, I'm going to spend some time just, bouncing around to our panelists and asking, various questions that might maybe help the audience see a different perspective around your professional journey. I'll just share a couple of quick things around mine because people probably are like, wait, chief data and analytics officer, was an air traffic controller, like what's going on? And, I've seen a couple of different things through my career journey. I too did not come into this space in a very traditional way, but I do have an undergraduate degree in air traffic management. I did spend some time as a controller at Cleveland Hopkins International. And also on the other side of the industry, on the aerospace side. And I will tell you that during my professional journey, I saw a very different world than maybe what exists today. And that was many, many moons ago. But one of the interesting things that I have had an opportunity to do was to be in the profession, be on the consulting side, but also have a technology lens. I worked on the very first implementation. It was actually my design for the Oceanic Data Link System, ODL1. Some of you may have heard of that before. So just kind of tying it all together, right, as you heard about non-traditional, traditional paths and other opportunities in the space. That's one that I had an opportunity to be a part of, to contribute, and to sort of give me the opportunity to show up here today, quite frankly. So with that, let's move into a fire round of questions. I'm going to start with Kirsten. Kirsten, as a woman in aviation, when we think through the lens of diversity, when we think through all the things that one might face, and then when we think about the current climate, right? Can you give any feedback on how you have overcome challenges, the different challenges that you may have faced as a woman in this particular sector?
Sorry, absolutely. So I will say that I may be a little bit different. I did grow up as a caveat with 8 brothers, so my approach might be a little bit different than the average bear out there woman. But yeah, early on in my career, I definitely experienced bias. Won't get into a lot of detail, disrespectful behavior. And it was frustrating, but what worked for me, and I hope works for others today, this just goes to emphasize why your network and your community is so important, is I reached out to my trusted network. So whether it was a friend or a mentor or a boss, ask a perspective of how to handle a situation, because it's always nice to have someone to talk through a problem with, or even an emotion, or whatever it is you're experiencing, just to validate that it's okay to be going through that. But I would say 100%, most importantly, you need to take action. You need to face whatever it is head on, and you don't ever hesitate to politely and professionally, and again, politely and professionally look inappropriate behavior in the eye and just knock it down. And I think that especially today, there's always going to be some sort of support system out there that's going to back you up on that. So again, I grew up with 8 brothers, so I might get a little bit more like, just knock that down.
Right, I love it. I love it.
It might be a tad aggressive, but that's what worked for me.
Awesome, great advice. Thank you so much for sharing that. Let's flip over to Ryan. Ryan, this will coincide with a question that is currently in our Q&A, so maybe we can kill a couple birds with one stone. Ryan, you've spent your entire career in business aviation. What was that always your original plan? And then as you talk a little bit about that being your original plan, can you maybe also talk a little bit about, or just double click a little bit more on, what your recommendation might be to someone who didn't have this as their plan, and knowing what what would you tell them to do? Like, what would be the new equation for someone who wanted to pursue this, becoming a pilot?
Absolutely, and I see we have a question from Nick, so I'll try to answer that at the same time. But no, this wasn't the original plan. After I learned to fly and fell in love with aviation, of course, all I knew was the airline route. And it wasn't until I went to school and then worked at the FBO that I saw that there was such a huge opportunity there. There was these beautiful, sexy jets and these professionals making wonderful careers out of it, that I just knew that that's where I needed to be. It was a great mixture of flying professionally and the sexiness and GA of these airplanes. I think if I was going to give some advice to anyone who wants to go into being a pilot like I am, is, get an education, for sure, get an education, do your training, try to do those at the same time if you can, and be as close to the action as possible. Get a job at the airport, whatever it is, just be close and be tied to it and start networking. A lot of the people that I still know today is a network that I had from pumping gas back in the day in San Jose, California. So, and a lot of those pilots that I looked up to are now flying, BBJs and Gulfstream 700s, and I still use them as mentors. So. Oh, you're up. Stephanie, there you go.
Okay, there you go. Thank you, Ryan, for
You're
sharing.
welcome.
Thank you for the double whammy on answering the question in the Q&A. I'm going to flip over to Hunter quickly. Hey, Hunter, what is one skill you think could help all professionals in business aviation?
And this is coming from my own personal experience and something that I did not learn at Embry-Riddle, and something that I've caught on with the trade of the job. It's customer service. And that's something you can be trained on, and it's something you continuously need to be trained on. But especially in the business aviation environment, each client is different, no matter who it is. And so if you can make a customer experience that's more adaptable and give them that special attention and experience, that is where it will show you go above and beyond. You show them the quality of your product. And it's a skill set that I value today in my day-to-day job. And I'm constantly learning of how can I make myself better? How can I provide that #1 high tier of customer service? And it's frankly something schools don't teach. And I don't know why, but it's something they should. It's something, no matter what industry you have, you constantly need to have great customer service, either that's internal or external. But that's the one I would go with for sure.
No, thank you for sharing. I think that's extremely valuable. I think it ties into, points made by each one of our panelists, right? And that is, being very diverse in terms of your skills, not only the technical skills that one needs to be able to take command of the various positions and opportunities across the aviation portfolio, but also the ability to connect with people, right? Kirsten talked about, being kind, but also, being on top of your game, and, your ability to be able to, exercise your soft skills as proficiently as you exercise your technical skill sets that you develop or that you learn are uber important. So thanks for that. Customer service is key. I think right now we're seeing a lot of transition in terms of the focus around aviation and an uptick. I think, Derek, you talked a little bit about there being a big uptick in terms of opportunity and growth in this particular COVID time that we have. And so I'd like to maybe offer up to the entire panelist team a question from Brian Gambino, who is asking, business aviation is booming right now as people stray from airlines and flock their businesses to corporate flying. Do you think when the pandemic comes to an end, business aviation may see a drop in customers? Who would like to take a shot at answering that question? Or multiple folks can weigh in.
I'll jump in to start, but I think we're seeing a new customer that's entering the business jet market, and the other end of this pandemic, yeah, they may go back and start flying airlines a little bit more, but now they've been exposed to business aviation, and now usually once you're in, if you have the means to do it, you're gonna continue down that path, and they might do 50-50, 60-40, whatever it is, it'll likely stay in their life.
Awesome. Well, that leads us right to sort of the questions around marketing. I mean, Derek plays a very specific role in this particular space, and how you market and how you sell become a factor of success in this space. And Derek, what are you seeing, and kind of how would you articulate the future of business aviation through the lens that you see today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, right at in the initial part of the pandemic, the fear was, a lot of transactions ceased, and then as the months progressed, and you saw, or specifically, I saw a ramp up of interest in what it looks like to own your own airplane and use that as a way of travel. A lot of customers are started to explore, I travel, my employees travel from point A to point B all the time on a weekly basis, or I'm having to get, a team here and a team there, using these airplanes as really because folks are scared about, the airline travel, they're scared about that. So they're using these tools to complete their mission, and people are finding that using that tool is more than just a measure of safety. It can be more efficient. It can be quicker. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity that's going to come out of this. I think people are really finding ways to leverage business aviation to really meet their needs for their business as well as for their personal travel.
It's 2:00. Well, I know we are at the top of the hour. Thank you so much, Derek, for that. And I do want to be respectful of everyone's time and commitment to attending our session today. Why don't we just wrap quickly with one final question, because I know Q&A because I know sometimes it's like, oh, can I just get that last one in, even if it's 60 seconds? I'll hold on. But maybe if we just do a quick response to Caroline McMahon's question, who is coming in from Switzerland. And Caroline says, I'm currently doing my CPL-IR. Do you have any tips to build your self-confidence when you go through a difficult patch in your training? And I know that Kirsten sort of addressed this a bit. I know Ryan talked a little bit about it. Caleb talked a little bit about it. But I'm going to open it up at panelists. Is there anything specifically that you would double down on in providing advice to Caroline from Switzerland?
I'll chime in. Specifically, I remember when I was doing my instrument rating, I had an instructor, and he was tough. He was very, very tough. And we were on a lesson one day, and we were doing some VOR tracking, and I could not get it down. And I remember this instructor looking to me and saying, is this for you? Is flying for you? And it drained me. And I was like, I left that lesson going, oh my gosh, is this the right path for me? And so I lost a lot of motivation during that point and really got discouraged. And so in order for me to pick back up and, you know, try to find that like passion again and excitement around doing my instrument rating, I found a different instructor. And I told her, I said, really? I said, I just want to like go and let's do some touch and goes and let's like just fly. And so she jumped in the airplane with me and we went out, and she gave me a completely different perspective. She was like, you know, complimenting me on certain things. And it was it was a great way for me to really reboost my confidence after somebody had kind of like tore me down. She was able to come in and just give me a fresh perspective. So I would encourage anyone, if you're getting discouraged, don't forget to, you know, if you're not liking your instructor, you know, you're welcome to change. Nothing says that you can't change. And then secondly, don't forget why you're doing it in the first place. If you love to fly, take a break from lessons and go out and fly and get $100 hamburger or something of that nature. So don't lose sight of your passion to fly during your training. That's my best advice.
Yeah, and Stefan, if I could chime in there, you know, not all the ratings are the same. You know, I hated the commercial, loved the instrument. I loved doing the CFI instructing, kind of got bored by it by the time I got to the ATP, hated aerobatic fly, you know, so they're not all the same. So you might be able to just sort of crest a certain hump and then you'll find your stride on the other side of that.
Great advice, both from Derek and Ryan. I want to just, you know, wrap up today with a big thank you to all of our audience, right, for participating, to NGPA for being the sponsor, for sponsoring this event and putting it on. A big thank you to Luke, who has helped us pretty much orchestrate, administrate, and make this a success. And to all of our panelists, thank you all for sharing both your personal and professional journeys. We hope to see you again and have a great, energized and encouraged day. Take care.
Thanks, and you're welcome.
Don't forget your hashtags, social media.
And go buy that G700.
That's right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks for the hat,
Thanks,
Kirsten.
guys. Take care.
Bye.